Hello everybody, today I'm going to be showing you how I made a hair slide pin out of 2 old tent stakes. So I'm going to be starting off with these tent stakes right here. They have about a 1/4 inch diameter all the way around, and then they have that little bend at the top right there. At this point I'm going to go ahead and light the forge up and let it stay on for just a little bit so that it can heat up. And now I'm going to take the stakes and throw them into the forge with the bent side under the flame, because that's what I'm going to be working on first. So I'm going to start off by taking out the stakes and flattening that bent part out so that the whole stake is straight. Make sure that it gets completely flattened out and doesn't have any divots in it. This next stake was a little more bent, so it took a little extra effort to kind of get it into the straightened state, but it wasn't too hard. So the stakes that I'm using are coated with something that makes them more resistant to rust. So when that burns, it leaves some yellow stuff on there that I was just trying to get off with this wire brush. At this point, I'm going to start flattening them out. What I'm going for is about half the original thickness, and I'm hoping I can get half of the original thickness all the way through the entire length of the stake. Go ahead and clean the anvil off a little bit and work on continuing to flatten them. Like I said, I'm wanting these to be about half the diameter they used to be, and I want them to be half the diameter all the way through, and I want this to be on both stakes. After both stakes are flat, I'm going to take one of them and I'm going to start drawing out the end into more of a point. I'm going to still try to keep it at half its diameter, but I'm not aiming for perfection here, so if it is just a little thicker than the rest of the stake, then it's completely fine. Once I'm done with that first side, I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other side and draw it out to more of a point. I'm going to try to keep it at half its diameter, but if it isn't half its diameter, then it's not too big of a deal. Like I said, I'm not aiming for perfection, and the reason for that is because I want it to have sort of a handmade aesthetic to it. I don't want it to be perfect, and I don't want it to be all polished and nice. I want it to look like it was kind of roughly made. Once I've gotten it fully drawn out, this is kind of the shape that I'm looking for. As you can see, it's not completely perfectly sharp to a point, but it is sharper, and it kind of has that taper on it, and it is straight all the way through. After that's heated up again, I'm going to take it out of the forge, and I'm going to start forging a curl into it. I'm going to start by putting a 90-degree bend into it, and then start hitting it into more of a hook. And then once it gets to that point, I'm going to start forging it a little more in and into more of a tight curl, and getting it a little straighter and making sure it doesn't start twisting weird. If you need to, you can get a smaller hammer out. It'll probably help with getting it to be a little more intricate and getting the hits to be a little more exactly where you want them to be. And then I'm going to start straightening it into a better shape that I like a little more. As you can kind of see here, this is the shape that I was going for. You can put more curls into it if you want. You can put a bigger curl into it if you want, but this is what I was hoping for. Now here I'm going to show you kind of a different way that you can put that curl into it, because not everyone's too great with a hammer, and I definitely am not. So what I did this time was I decided to just get some needle nose pliers and just start twisting them and getting that little bit of a curl into the steak. And then after that, I got my smaller hammer and started tapping that curl into a shape that I was more happy with. And as you can see here, this is the shape we're going for. It is one curl going up and one curl going down. We're going to throw it back to the forge, and next we're going to heat up the middle of it so we can start putting the bigger curves into it, kind of making it to an S-hook shape. Flattening it out just a little bit to make sure it's straighter, and get about halfway down, and then start putting that curl into it. I'm going to use the horn of the anvil to put a little bit of a straighter, nicer curl into it, and then flattening it out if it starts twisting. As you can kind of see right here, the curl is not necessarily turning into a desirable shape, and it's something I'm going to be fixing a little later on. Now it's back in the forge for a heat on the other side so that we can do the exact same thing, but backwards. Again, we're gonna start curling it down. This one was not at the halfway point, but it's about as close as I thought I could get. I'm also gonna be swapping back and forth from the anvil horn to the flat part, just so I can kind of make sure it doesn't twist too much, but also get a cleaner curl in there. At this point, you can kind of see I butcher the shape and bend each side of it way too far. Because of that, I decided to get my pliers and kind of straighten it out a little bit off camera. As you can kind of see here, it's a much nicer shape and it looks just a little bit cleaner, but it still has some straightening out to do, which I'm trying to do here with a hammer, but inevitably I'll be taking it to the workbench and just straightening out with pliers. So now we're at the workbench, and I'm just going to be putting some more intricate and a little more detailed curves into this thing, just trying to straighten it out and make sure it's a little more even on both sides. And after that final kind of straightening with the pliers, you can see that it is a much nicer shape and it is a lot more even and clean. At this point, I'm going to be taking the pin part out and I'm going to start drawing the end of it out and turning it into more of a point, but still keeping it pretty flat. I also took this as an opportunity to put that infinity looking part in and flatten it out, because after that straightening with the pliers, it turned pretty wavy, so I just flattened that out pretty quick. Now we're going to go to the pin, which I drew out. I'm going to start by putting a small curve in the end of it. After that curve is in there for the most part, just making sure that it doesn't twist and flattening it out a little better. And it's back into the forge, but before I put it all the way into the forge, I'm going to take it out and kind of show you what I wanted that to look like. Just kind of get that little shape right there. Next, I'm going to take the pin under the fire and I'm going to actually quench the end of it so that that curl I already put into the pin doesn't mess up anymore. And I'm going to start curling it the other way, making sure that every time it starts twisting weird, I'm flattening it back out so it doesn't leave any permanent twists that I can't really get out easy. And making sure it's flat, I'm gonna try to put it back into the forge and forget again to show you the shape. So I'm gonna take it back out, show you that shape. That's kind of the shape I was going for. It's pretty simple. And put it right back into the fire. Next, I'm gonna take the pin out of the forge and I'm going to try to start forging it, but completely forget that I have to quench it first. So I'm gonna quench the end of it so that it doesn't mess up when I am forging it, and I'm going to start forging it the other way, so that I can start putting in yet another curl into it, but the opposite direction. Next, I'm going to take it back out of the forge and I'm going to start putting that extra curve in a little more. I forgot to quench it, but it didn't cause any huge problems, thankfully. And just trying to get that curl just a little bit tighter so it looks kind of like the rest of it. At this point, I've pretty much gotten it done. Just need to make it just a little tighter, and that is kind of the shape that I'm looking for. Make sure it's flat, make sure it's not curling weird, and that's the shape I was looking for with that. Next, I'm going to take it out of the forge again, and I'm going to try to start straightening that overall design out. I did a little bit off camera, so that's why it doesn't look the exact same. And with this last little straightening bit, this pin should be done. Next, I'm going to take the infinity looking part of the hairpin and I'm going to kind of give it an extra little curl just so that the hairpin can actually fit into it. I'm going to curl it over the round part of the anvil, and I don't want to curl it so much that I can't tell what it is by looking straight on, but I don't want to curl it so little that the pin can't fit into it. Now it's onto the quench, because these are pretty thin pieces of metal, so I'm going to just quench them to make them harder so they don't bend as easy, and they shouldn't be going through too much blunt force that will cause them to snap. This material isn't super high quality, so a water quench should suffice. You shouldn't need some high-end, expensive quenching oil to get these things to harden properly. After I'd quenched both of them and they cooled down, I took a wire brush to both of them just to clean some of that excess like scale and debris off of them, just to make them a little smoother and a little nicer, because if someone's putting this in their hair, they're probably not going to want some crappy stuff all over the metal when they do put it on their hair. And then after I was done with the wire brush, I went to some Scotch-Brite and used that on all of them just to give it that extra bit of polish while still keeping the handmade forged look. Here's the final product. I think it came out pretty nice. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.